Arzu had grown up in the heart of the countryside, where life was slow, and every sunrise carried the fragrance of earth and crops. Her family lived humbly, depending on herbal medicines passed down through generations. She was known in the village as the girl who healed with kindness, her soft touch and natural remedies calming even the harshest pains. Far away in the city, Rayan Malik ruled an empire built on pharmaceuticals. His name carried both fear and power. He was called the Drug King by competitors. Wealth, influence, and cold arrogance defined him. But behind his ruthless image, he suffered from a rare condition that no modern medicine could ease. Every night, agony gripped him, making him restless, broken, and desperate for a cure. Fate twisted when Rayan's convoy stopped near Arzu's village due to his sudden attack. His bodyguards rushed to find any help nearby, and that's when Arzu appeared, clutching her small basket of herbs. Her wide brown eyes didn't carry fear of his status, only concern for his pain. "You're burning up." "Hold still," she whispered, crushing herbs and applying them gently to his skin. Within moments, the man who had fought countless sleepless nights felt a strange calmness wash over him. His breathing steadied, his pain subsided. Rayan opened his eyes, shocked. The girl in front of him wasn't a doctor, wasn't from his world, yet her presence had done what no medicine could. "Who are you?" he rasped, his voice both suspicious and shaken. Arzu, oblivious to his power, simply replied, "Just someone who wants to heal." For the first time, Rayan Malik, the man who had everything, looked at someone as if she carried the one thing he had always craved, relief. He didn't know then that this village girl wasn't just his antidote, but the beginning of a storm that would change his life forever. Rayan Malik had lived his entire life with power at his fingertips. Doctors bowed to him, experts begged for his favor, yet none of them could ease the invisible chains of agony he carried every night. His condition made him unpredictable, violent outbursts, sleepless rage and loneliness wrapped around him like poison. But that night in the village, the impossible happened. The pain that dominated his life weakened under the touch of a girl who didn't even know his name. She hadn't asked for money, hadn't trembled at his reputation. Instead, she had looked at him as if he were a man, not a monster. Rayan couldn't get her out of his mind. The sensation of calmness that followed her herbs lingered. For the first time in years, he had slept for 2 straight hours without torment. To him, that was a miracle. The next morning, a line of luxury black cars roared into Arzu's village. The children ran after them in excitement, while elders whispered nervously. Rayan stepped out in his sharp black suit, his presence commanding silence. But his eyes weren't cold this time, they searched, restless until they landed on her. Arzu, with her simple dress stained by work, stared back at him confused. "You," he said in a low, controlled voice. "You're coming with me." Gasps filled the air. The villagers exchanged worried looks. Arzu's mother rushed forward protective, but Rayan's guards blocked her path. I can't leave. My family needs me," Arzu stammered, clutching her mother's hand. Rayan's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to refusals, especially from someone so ordinary. Yet beneath his frustration, he felt an odd desperation. He needed her, more than any medicine, more than any doctor. "Then bring them with you," he commanded. His voice held no room for argument. That night, Arzu found herself in a world she had never imagined. A mansion with golden chandeliers, endless marble halls, and men who bowed to Rayan's slightest gesture. But even among this luxury, Rayan's condition returned, his pain clawing at him like fire. And once again, Arzu was called to his side. Her hands trembled as she touched him, but the moment her herbs met his skin, his body relaxed and his breathing steadied. For Rayan, this girl had become something more than a healer. She was his antidote. For Arzu, however, this was the beginning of a dangerous bond she didn't yet understand. Days passed, and Arzu's presence in Rayan Malik's mansion became a whisper among the staff. Who was this simple village girl that dared to stay close to their ruthless master? Everyone had seen men in suits, doctors with diplomas and specialists from abroad, yet none had been able to calm his condition the way she could. But Arzu herself felt like a stranger in this palace. Every corridor echoed with secrets. Every wall carried the weight of Rayan's dominance. His gaze was sharp, his tone commanding. Yet there were rare moments when his pain struck that She saw something different in him: vulnerability, loneliness. One evening, as she prepared her herbs, she found herself outside his study. Through the half-open door, she saw him sitting in silence, glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. His eyes were fixed on an old photograph. Curiosity made her step closer. The photo showed a younger Ryan, standing with a woman and a man, his parents perhaps. But the woman's face was blurred with time, and the man's eyes looked stern, almost cruel. "Don't!" Ryan's voice cut through the silence, sharp as a blade. Arzu froze, the tray trembling in her hands. His eyes met hers, stormy and guarded. "You don't walk into my past ever." Her lips parted, words failing her. She wanted to apologize, but his pain was written so clearly in his face that instead, she softly said, "Sometimes, carrying wounds alone makes them heavier." For a moment, the ruthless CEO looked at her as if she had spoken a language no one else dared to. His jaw clenched, but his silence was louder than anger. Later that night, his condition worsened. The pain hit him like waves of fire, his breaths ragged, his fists slamming against the wall. Guards panicked, servants rushed, but only Arzu's touch brought relief. She pressed her herbs against his skin, whispering, "Breathe, just breathe." As the fire inside him slowly calmed, Ryan clutched her wrist, his grip strong but trembling. His eyes burned into hers, not with cruelty but with a desperate plea. "Why you?" he whispered hoarsely. "Why only you?" Arzu had no answer. She only knew one truth: her life had never been meant to cross his. Yet now fate had tied them together, and deep inside Ryan's broken soul, a seed had been planted, the beginning of something he didn't want to admit. The storm outside mirrored the storm raging inside Ryan's body. His rare condition had struck with a fury stronger than ever before. No doctor dared step closer. They had all failed too many times. Only one name echoed in the mansion that night: Arzu. She rushed into his room, her clothes damp from the rain, clutching her pouch of herbs. The sight before her shook her heart. Ryan's powerful frame trembled in agony, his breath shallow, his lips pale. For a moment, he didn't look like the ruthless CEO feared by millions. He looked like a man fighting to survive. Without hesitation, Arzu knelt beside him. Her hands moved with determination, grinding herbs, applying them to his burning skin, whispering soothing words. "Stay with me. You'll be fine. Just hold on." Ryan's hand shot up, gripping hers tightly. His eyes, dark with pain, locked onto hers, as if she were the only anchor keeping him alive. Slowly, the fire inside him began to dim. His breathing steadied. His chest rose and fell in rhythm with her touch. When the storm outside quieted, a heavier silence fell between them. Ryan's grip didn't loosen, and Arzu didn't pull away. In that fragile moment, something unspoken passed between them, a bond neither of them could deny. "You are my only cure," Ryan whispered, his voice rough, almost broken. Her heart pounded. She knew he was dangerous, a man built from power and shadows. Yet in that instant, he was vulnerable, human, and against her will, her feelings shifted. No longer was she just healing him. She was falling into something deeper, something forbidden. That night, emotions overpowered logic. Two souls from different worlds collided. Ryan, starved of comfort and touch, found himself surrendering to the warmth only she could give. Arzu, torn between fear and compassion, couldn't resist the pull of his brokenness. By dawn, nothing was the same. Weeks later, Arzu's world spun when the truth hit her. The sickness she felt wasn't from exhaustion, it was life. Not one, not two, but 3 tiny heartbeats grew inside her. Triplets, the simple rural girl who had once healed the ruthless CEO, now carried his future within her. And when Ryan learned of it, his cold heart would be shaken in ways he had never imagined. Arzu's hands wouldn't stop shaking. As she clutched the report the doctor had given her, she had come here hoping it was just weakness. Maybe fever from overwork, but the truth written in bold letters made her heart race faster than ever. Pregnant. And not just with one child. The doctor's voice still echoed in her ears. "It's rare, but you're carrying triplets. Triplets, 3 lives." Her breath hitched and tears welled up in her eyes. She was a village girl raised in simplicity, never imagining she would face such a storm. How could she tell her family? How could she explain to the world? And most of all, How could she face Rayan Malik, the ruthless CEO who had unknowingly changed her destiny? When she returned to the mansion that evening, she tried to hide her trembling, but nothing escaped Rayan's sharp eyes. He studied her pale face, her silence, the way she avoided his gaze. "What are you hiding?" His voice was low, commanding. It's nothing," she whispered, clutching the edge of her dress. Rayan stood towering over her, his presence overwhelming. "Don't lie to me, Arzu." Her chest tightened. She had never feared him when healing him, but this truth could break everything. Yet she couldn't carry the burden alone. With tears brimming, she finally confessed, her voice trembling, "I'm pregnant with your children." The room went silent. For the first time, Rayan Malik, the man who ruled empires, who made others tremble, stood frozen. His eyes darkened, his jaw clenched, and he turned away as if the air had been knocked out of him. "Children?" he muttered, almost to himself. "Not one. 3, Arzu whispered, her hands protectively resting over her stomach. Rayan's fists tightened. Triplets. The revelation shook him to his core. He wasn't a man who believed in family, in innocence, in love. His life had been built on power, on walls that kept emotions out. And now in front of him stood the girl who had unknowingly given him the greatest responsibility of all. He spun around, his gaze sharp, voice trembling with an emotion he couldn't name. "Do you realize what this means? Your life, my life. Nothing will ever be the same." Tears slid down Arzu's cheeks, but her chin lifted. "I didn't choose this fate, but I will protect them, even if I have to do it alone." Rayan's heart twisted. For a man who had always controlled everything, for the first time, he realized he might lose something he hadn't even known he wanted. Triplets, his blood, his legacy, his weakness, and perhaps his salvation. The news of Arzu's pregnancy spread faster than wildfire. The mansion's staff whispered in hidden corners, and soon the outside world began to murmur. To them it was scandalous. The ruthless CEO, Rayan Malik, entangled with a simple rural girl who now carried his heirs. Rayan's board of directors scoffed at the thought. His business rivals laughed in disbelief. Even within his own circle, women who once dreamt of becoming his wife mocked Arzu's presence. One evening during a business dinner, the whispers became daggers. Arzu, dressed modestly, had been asked to join Rayan, though she wished to remain invisible. As she walked into the glittering hall filled with diamonds and silk, her plain clothes and nervous hands invited sneers. "Is this the girl who carries the CEO's bloodline?" One woman whispered with a laugh. "She looks more like a servant than a mother of heirs," another smirked, her voice dripping with venom. Arzu's face flushed. She lowered her gaze, clutching her stomach protectively, wishing she could disappear. But before another word could pierce her heart, the sound of a chair scraping against the marble floor silenced the room. Rayan Malik stood. His sharp gaze swept across the table, freezing every whisper, silencing every laugh. Without hesitation, he walked to Arzu's side. His hand came down firmly on her shoulder, his voice cold, commanding, and full of authority. "Anyone who dares disrespect her, disrespects me." The hall fell into stunned silence. Gasps echoed, but no one dared to breathe a word. Rayan looked at Arzu then, his voice lowering just enough for her to hear. "You are not alone. Not now, not ever." For the first time, Arzu saw something in his eyes that wasn't cruelty or control. It was protection. It was a silent vow. From that night forward, no one dared to mock her openly again. But in the shadows, Rayan's enemies stirred with greater hatred. To them, the triplets she carried weren't heirs, they were threats. And while Rayan's heart slowly began to shift from coldness to warmth, he didn't realize that danger was drawing closer. The triplets had become his weakness, and weaknesses in his world invited war. For years, Rayan Malik had lived behind iron walls. No one saw his weakness, no one heard his pain. He was ruthless, unshaken, untouchable. But ever since Arzu entered his life, those walls began to crack piece by piece. At night, when the world slept, he often stood alone on the rooftop, staring at the city he ruled yet never belonged to. The lights below looked beautiful, but to him, they were nothing but reminders of his loneliness. Arzu found him there one evening. She hesitated, then softly stepped closer. "You shouldn't drink so much," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Rayan didn't turn, his eyes still on the skyline. "You think your herbs can cure this too?" His voice carried bitterness, but not at her, at himself. Arzu moved beside him, her shawl fluttering in the night breeze. "Not herbs," she whispered. "Sometimes all a person needs is someone who won't leave." Her words struck deeper than she knew. Rayan's jaw tightened, memories flashing in his mind. His mother's tears, his father's cruelty, the endless nights of pain. He had been abandoned, betrayed, used. Love to him was a weakness, a weapon. And yet this girl, so simple, so unafraid, stood beside him as though she saw not the CEO, but the man beneath. For a moment he let the mask slip. He lowered his glass and whispered, almost as if confessing a sin, "I don't know how to protect what I've never had." Arzu's heart clenched. She gently placed her hand on his arm. "Then learn, for them and for yourself." Inside the mansion, however, enemies were already plotting. A rival company, furious at Rayan's growing empire, had discovered Arzu's existence and the children she carried. To them, she wasn't a mother-to-be. She was the softest target to strike the hardest blow. That night, while Rayan allowed himself a rare moment of vulnerability, shadows moved in secret, preparing to destroy the only light that had entered his life. And though he didn't yet realize it, his greatest battle was no longer with his illness, but with the world that wanted to rip Arzu and the unborn triplets away from him. The days following, Rayan's rooftop confession grew quieter between him and Arzu. Yet silence didn't mean distance, it meant understanding. He no longer barked orders at her. Instead, his watchful eyes followed her every step, especially as her belly began to show. But the world outside was not silent. Rayan's enemies had found his weakness, and they waited for the perfect moment to strike. One evening, Arzu insisted on visiting the village clinic for a routine checkup. Rayan, occupied in a late-night board meeting, reluctantly allowed her to go, but only with 2 bodyguards. He thought it was enough. He was wrong. As the clinic visit ended, the parking garage below stood unusually empty. The guards walked a few steps ahead when suddenly, 2 masked men emerged from the shadows. Their movements were swift, their eyes sharp with malice. "Take her," one hissed. Arzu froze, her arms instinctively wrapping around her belly. Fear surged through her veins. The guards tried to fight, but they were quickly overpowered. One attacker lunged toward her, and Arzu stumbled back, her voice trembling. "No, please!" At that very moment, headlights blazed through the garage. A sleek black car screeched to a halt, the sound echoing like thunder. The door flung open, and Rayan Malik stepped out, his fury colder than ice, sharper than steel. The attackers hesitated, but only for a second. Rayan's bodyguards rushed in, but Rayan himself moved forward, his fists striking with precision. He wasn't just a CEO tonight. He was a man fighting for everything he refused to lose. Within minutes, the attackers lay defeated, scrambling away into the shadows. Rayan's chest heaved as he turned toward Arzu. She stood frozen, her eyes wide with fear and tears, her hands still protectively cradling her belly. He rushed to her, his voice low but shaking with emotion. "Are you hurt? Tell me." Arzu shook her head, tears spilling. I thought I'd lose them." Rayan's hands trembled as he cupped her face. For the first time, his mask of control shattered. "No one will ever touch you. Not while I breathe." His words weren't just a promise, they were a vow. But in the dark corners of the city, Rayan's enemies didn't retreat. They had tested his weakness, and now they knew his heart was no longer untouchable. Arzu and the triplets weren't just his cure. They were his everything, and in the cruel world he lived in, that made them the greatest target. The attack in the parking garage had changed everything. Since that night, Rayan Malik never let Arzu out of his sight. He increased security, doubled guards, and cancelled meetings just to be near her. For a man who once lived only for business, he was now living for something far more fragile, her safety, and the lives growing inside her. The mansion, once cold and lifeless, began to change too. Entire sections were redesigned under Rayan's orders. A nursery was prepared, 3 cradles lined in a row, soft toys placed carefully, walls painted with pastel shades. The staff whispered in awe. The ruthless CEO, who had never smiled, was now planning a future filled with laughter. Arzu, at first overwhelmed, found herself softening too. One evening she stood in the nursery, running her hand along the tiny cradles. Her eyes sparkled with a quiet dream. She whispered, "One day, this place will echo with their cries, their laughter." Unbeknownst to her, Rayan stood at the doorway. He watched her, his heart stirring in ways he never imagined possible. For years his life had been shadowed by pain, betrayal and loneliness. Yet here was this simple girl, creating light in the very place he thought would always be dark. When she turned and caught him staring, her cheeks flushed. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Rayan stepped closer, his voice unusually gentle. "Because you've given me something I never believed I deserved. A family." Her breath caught. She had never expected such words from him. The man who once treated emotions as weakness. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "They're not just yours, Rayan, they're ours." In that moment, the distance between them vanished. For the first time, Rayan Malik's heart was not guarded by walls of power. It was bridged by the tiny lives that connected them. But outside the safety of the mansion, enemies weren't done. The triplets weren't only heirs, they were the ultimate threat to his rivals. And as whispers of betrayal and plots deepened, Rayan realized love alone wouldn't be enough. To protect Arzu and their unborn children, he would need to wage a war unlike any before. And this time, the fight wasn't for his empire, it was for his heart. The days leading to the birth of the triplets were tense with both joy and danger. Rayan Malik had tightened his empire like a fortress, crushing rivals who dared to threaten Arzu or the unborn children. But no amount of power could shield his heart from the fear of losing them. When the night finally came, panic gripped the mansion. Arzu's cries echoed through the halls as labor began early. The storm outside, raging like fate itself, was testing them one last time. Rayan, the man who never bowed to anyone, felt helpless for the first time in his life. He paced the hospital corridor, his usually perfect suit wrinkled, his hands trembling. Every second felt like a lifetime. When the doctor emerged, Rayan's heart nearly stopped. "She's struggling," the doctor said. "But she's strong. She wants you inside." Without hesitation, Rayan pushed through the doors. Inside, Arzu lay exhausted, sweat on her forehead, her hands gripping the sheets. Her eyes fluttered open when she saw him. I can't," she whispered weakly. Rayan knelt beside her, taking her hand firmly, his voice breaking for the first time. "Yes, you can. You've healed me, Arzu. You saved me when no one else could. Now let me be your strength. Fight for them, for us." Her tears mingled with his as she nodded, squeezing his hand. With his words anchoring her, she pushed through the storm of pain. Minutes stretched into eternity until finally cries filled the room. One, then another, then another. 3 tiny voices, fragile yet powerful, announcing their arrival to the world. Arzu sobbed with relief as the nurses placed the newborns in her arms. Rayan's vision blurred as he looked down at them. 3 little lives, his blood, his legacy, his heart outside his chest. For the first time in his ruthless life, Rayan Malik wept openly. He bent down, kissing Arzu's forehead, whispering hoarsely, "You weren't just my antidote. You are my life, my love, my everything." The world outside still carried enemies, power struggles, and endless storms. But inside that room, Rayan found something greater than all of it. Peace. The rural girl who once healed his pain had given him a reason to live. And with the triplets cradled between them, their hearts finally knew the truth. This wasn't just fate, this was forever.